I think Chicagoans also feel a sense of renewal. Spring is here, and I think the winds of change are blowing through Chicago.
It's also an important holiday for us as Passover. Because on that holiday, we remember the journey to freedom and to a place. And we're on a journey as a city together. And our destination is where our children have a better life.
Well, journey, that's one way of putting it. Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel there. Before him, you heard his opponent, Jesus Chuy Garcia, at separate Easter and Passover events over the weekend talking about this coming election.
Yeah, this mayoral runoff in Chicago is the first since the city adopted nonpartisan elections in the 1990s. The current mayor, Rahm Emanuel, failed to win a majority in February's first round election. An
embarrassment for him, also an embarrassment for President Obama, who he worked for as his chief of staff, coming to Chicago to lobby on his behalf. Meantime, the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners says more than 142,300 residents voted early, compared with nearly 90,000 ahead of the February election and roughly 73,000 people before the 2011 election. So what does turnout mean for the standing mayor? Will he be in that office come tomorrow? For more on this developing story, we're joined by former Illinois Congressman, a former resident of the greater Chicagoland area, and current president of Flanagan Consultant, Michael Patrick Flanagan. Good to have you with us as well. Larry Eller standing by as well. First, this is got to be difficult for Rahm Emanuel. He never thought he'd be in this position, Michael. Are you as surprised as everybody else that he might actually lose this runoff?
Well, you know, Chicago is a fascinating place, but Rahm Emanuel hasn't been in Chicago for over a decade and longer before. He left with the Clintons and basically hung out in Washington and elsewhere and came back to run for Congress. He had served several terms there, then left again, then came back. So Chicagoans are very parochial about that kind of thing, and he had a high hill to climb.
Michael, I just read a piece in the National Journal called Broken City about Chicago, and they quoted a local pundit, very respected, who said that the city is in an economic death spiral because of the rising pension obligations, the bad schools, and the crime, and it really won't matter much whether Rahm Emanuel wins or Garcia wins. Do you agree with that analysis?
I don't know that I can say no. Chicago is in a very bad way. It's always been a big union town, and those chickens have come home to roost. I think a lot of this started with Shachtman when they got rid of patronage jobs where you could hire and fire and pay very little and run the city on the cheap. Now that it's actually run on real salaries and they have unionized salaries as well, I don't know that any major city is going to avoid this forever, but Chicago is looking very hard at it now. That's absolutely correct.
Michael, let's talk about unions. How much of a role do unions play when it comes to this election? Because we're hearing a lot of the unions still support Rahm when it comes to winning this election.
The time-tried unions, the old unions do, but SEIU is big in Chuy's camp, and they have turned out a huge amount of early vote, much larger as your lead-in observed in the past. Almost all of that is Chuy's vote for today. Rahm has 250,000 absentee ballots out in grand Chicago fashion. I'm sure they'll all vote. They'll all vote late, and they'll all vote right. But the Chuy vote is actually out there hardworking. It's a Latino vote. It's a solid vote. I don't count him out today, but the polls seem to be shading in Rahm's favor.
Well, Michael, double digits.
And considering as broken as Chicago seems to be, what would a mayoralship under Chuy Garcia look like for Chicago? I mean, he doesn't have the experience as Rahm Emanuel. Maybe that wouldn't harm him.
I'm the only Republican alive who sent Chuy a check, but I did. I think Chuy. Rahm got all the.
I bet you're not the only Republican alive. Now that we think about it, I bet you're not.
No, I thought I wouldn't be, but I think I am. Most of the Republican money came in for Rahm because they wanted a guy who would treat business right, and I think maybe Rahm has promised he will anyway. Whether he does or not, we'll see. But I think Chuy will have more of the people involved in what he's doing, and I don't know that he'll be the best mayor Chicago ever had, but I think that he will get out of the usual way of doing business and look at things new and fresh. And he decided early on that he'd handle the economic policies by convening a commission to look at it, make hard decisions, and then follow through on those decisions. It was kind of a weak answer when asked early in the campaign, how are you going to solve the city's problems? And he'll say, well, I'll figure it out later, is essentially the answer, and I think that's what's costing him today. But it might actually be the best answer to that question.
Yeah, things like what he's done with the school unions and with Rahm Emanuel, Chuy Garcia is certainly trying to reach that same folks who are against that. Larry, go ahead.
Michael, I saw that CNN special called Chicagoland, and I saw a black principal at Finger High School literally map out the roads where kids could go to and from school so they wouldn't get slaughtered by local gangs. I mean, what do you do about all of this? Why don't we have vouchers so that parents can send their kids where they want to send them as opposed to a dangerous, underperforming government school?
I cannot argue with you. The teachers union in Chicago is all powerful, all knowing, and all seeing, and it's very difficult to bump up against them. And the guy I'm supporting, Chewy, is definitely in league with them. So I can't really take issue with what you've said, and hopefully Chewy will find a way through it should he be elected. Mayor Emanuel doesn't have many other options. The union is quite powerful, and they resist school closings, and they resist not just vouchers, but actually consolidation of districts and areas where it would be helpful to do that. I think that to move forward on this, I think we have to look at the business of education anew. In '96, we wiped out busing at the request of the black community. I think it was in Cleveland. And it was a good and wise decision. It was a well thought of idea that turned out to not do what anybody wanted to do. I think we have to start looking at a lot of our issues with schools the same way and saying just because it's the way it's always been done doesn't mean it's right. But I think part of what you're talking about particularly is a crime issue, and Rahm has not done real well with crime, and we have to work harder on that, and that's more power for the police, more money for the police, more ability for the police to do the things that they need to do. And Chicagoans have always had a very warm relationship with the police, and so you're not going to see a lot of Ferguson type stuff. What you're going to see is a lot of support for people in the police who work hard and deserve to be rewarded and helped do their job.
Real quickly, we were just seeing a headline talking about education. The American Federation of Teachers strongly supports Garcia. They're saying that they're going to spend as much on this second round as they did the first round. Will that have any impact?
That's Chewy's mainstay of support, and they have had impact, and they have worked hard to get it done, and they will expect to be at the table afterward. Sadly, that's going to be part of the deal with the Chewy administration. But Rahm has his people who are going to be at the table too. You just don't know who they are, but believe me, they got big hands and sharp claws, and they're going to be carving out a piece for themselves, no question about it.
Well, we mentioned the absentee ballots, the early voting. It's happening early. Yes. And often, as it tends to do in Chicago. Larry Elder's going to be back with us. We want to say goodbye, though, to Michael Patrick Flanagan, former Congressman, coming to us live from Washington, D.C. Our pleasure, Congressman.
Now it's time for Newsmax National Weather Update.
Good morning, everyone. Let's take a look at your weather. That low pressure system coming off the west coast has dropped some rain in northern California. Let's see if it slides on down the coast. We've got some thunderstorms and hail from the pressure system there, and some much-needed rain barely touching southern California. Moving across the east, it's going to be nice in Montana and even Colorado. We've got a lot of showers, though, in the northern parts of the country, northern states. And the southern states, well, Texas, that storm is slowly creeping out of your area, but Oklahoma City, you're in the eye of this, as well as lots of Missouri. Moving on into the south, though, warm air leaving behind from all those showers and thunderstorms that are creeping their way up the east coast. Lots of showers in the east and in the northeast. Yes, it's spring. Yes, it's still cold. Hang in there, guys. It'll warm up for you. And here's a look at your national weather. Lots of rain, lots of sun, depending on where you are. Make the most of it.
All right, so as you might expect, folks there in Oklahoma and Arkansas and Texas, be wary of those severe storms.
California is very grateful, though, for all that weather that's going to be coming its way. So
not nearly enough. Severe drought, biblical proportions. We're going to talk about that and its impact on the real estate market coming up here on America's Forum.